Your opinion doesn't matter anymore, Mom. That's what Haley said, like she was trimming a flower. Quick snip, then right back to focusing on the centerpiece. I was just standing there, holding a tray of dinosaur cupcakes I'd baked the night before. My lavender cardigan already had a dusting of crumbs. For a second, I thought I must have heard her wrong, but no one around the picnic table even blinked. Just polite laughter floating along with the string lights swaying overhead. I'm Carolyn Walker. Used to be a school librarian, still a compulsive note-taker and a mom. I used to think a gentle word could soften anything. But that afternoon, it proved me wrong. The party was supposed to be simple. Logan was turning 5, balloons shaped like planets, burgers on the grill. I showed up early, arms full of decorations. Haley waved me off before I could even set the box down. "I've got it handled," she said, already watching the caterer. Later, during lunch, I tried again. I brought up something safe. Logan might love the library's summer reading program. They build little rocket ships out of cereal boxes. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. "We're raising him differently now." Greg gave a polite nod and went back to his phone. Logan was nearby, laughing, launching a foam rocket toward the fence. He was pure joy, totally untouched by the cold undercurrents around him. I found Elaine refilling lemonade. She squeezed my hand, gave me a look that asked a question I didn't have an answer for. I thought of something Tom used to say. "Carolyn, your quiet is your power." Back then I thought he meant patience, but now I wondered if he meant distance. After the cake, store-bought with way too much buttercream, I stood by the patio steps for a minute. I kept my voice soft. "I was thinking we could bake his favorite cake next weekend." Haley didn't miss a beat. "Honestly, Mom, I think it's better if you wait until you're invited." There it was, the freshly painted fence, neat, clear, with a nice little sign that said "Keep Out." I helped clean up the torn wrapping paper, said my goodbyes, kissed Logan's sticky cheek. He leaned in and whispered, "Thanks for the cupcakes, Grandma." And that almost broke me. But I carried the tray to my car, my hands steady, my heart pounding. Halfway home, her words played back in my mind. "Your opinion doesn't matter anymore. They didn't hurt, not exactly. They just settled in, like dust on a shelf no one's ever going to clean again." At the next red light, I picked up my phone. Every Friday at 10 a.m., I'd set a reminder years ago, call Haley. Back when she used to call me 3 times a day about teething or work stress. I deleted it. The screen faded to black, then glowed back to the GPS. Chapel Hill's summer haze blurred everything in the distance. Even the sun felt far. It wasn't sharp pain. It was the kind that just fades, like light through dirty glass. The silence in the car was heavy, but it was mine. I held the steering wheel and kept driving, and somewhere along the road I realized endings don't always slam the door. Sometimes they just slip into the seat next to you, click their seatbelt, and wait for you to notice. I kept my eyes forward, letting that first layer of silence settle in. And underneath it, I could just barely hear a quieter voice saying, "Smaller steps, fewer calls, less of me." Thanksgiving 2017 was the first time something really shifted, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. Haley called me 3 days before the holiday. Her voice was short, efficient, like she was reading off a script. "Mom, we're keeping it small this year. Just Greg's parents and a couple friends. Next year, okay?" I was standing in my kitchen, staring down at the butternut squash I'd already peeled. My hands smelled like rosemary and garlic. I said, "Of course, sweetheart," like that somehow made it easier to toss the herbs and microwave a turkey pot pie. I poured a glass of white wine and set the table for one. The silence wasn't new, but that day it felt official. Elaine called that night, like she always does. I told her it was fine. "It's just 1 year," I said, folding a linen napkin into my lap like someone might be watching. She paused for a moment, then said gently, "Being a mother is like lending out your heart with no return policy." In 2019, I spent 2 months making a quilt for Logan's birthday. Dinosaurs, planets, stars, little patches all stitched together, with his name sewn carefully into the corner. I pictured him curled under it, maybe dragging it around the house like he used to with that old blue blanket. A month went by, then an envelope showed up. No handwriting, just a printed return label. Inside, a typed thank you note. No signature, no drawing, no messy crayon joy. Just, "Thank you for the gift. Logan appreciates it." That was it. That night I pressed the quilt to my face, hoping it still held something of me, but it only smelled like cedar, the chest I kept it in, not Logan. By 2021, even the holidays felt like transactions. 2 days before Christmas, a Target gift card landed in my mailbox. No envelope, just the card, with a yellow post-it stuck on top. "Hope this helps. H." I sat at the kitchen table, just holding it, staring at it, like maybe it would say something more if I waited long enough. I didn't spend it. I tucked it in the drawer where I keep things that don't quite belong. Old keys, foreign coins, random screws from furniture we donated years ago. I couldn't throw it out. That felt too final. But I couldn't use it either. That felt like agreeing. Later that night, I was clearing off some old voicemail files, half on purpose, half just habit. I tapped on one, and there it was. Logan, age 6. "Hi, Grandma. Guess what? I made a volcano today and it exploded, and Daddy said it was epic, and I want to show you next time we come over, okay?" His voice was still high and quick, every word tumbling over the next like he couldn't get it out fast enough. I listened to it 3 times, and on the third time, I let the tears come, not sobbing, just quiet, steady rain. I set the phone down and whispered into the empty room, "I'm still here. I just stopped knocking." When the pain started to dull, I didn't feel relief. I just felt gone. Like a painting left out in the sun too long. You still recognize it, but all the colors faded. You can be erased without anyone raising their voice. Quietly, gently. It's not loud or messy. It's efficient. Haley didn't yell. She didn't slam any doors. She just got harder to reach and then harder to read. A soft kind of distancing, thin as paper, but sharp if you touch it the wrong way. The library in Durham was hosting a spring volunteer event. I honestly don't remember how I got on the mailing list. Maybe Elaine signed me up. She had this habit of accidentally nudging me back into life. There were bookmarks scattered on every table, hand-labeled by a local scout troop. The whole place smelled faintly of old books and lemon bars. Elaine spotted me from across the room. She was already chatting with someone from the historical fiction section. I hovered near a table of used books, just trying not to look too lost when someone called my name. "Carolyn?" I turned around. It was Tom Harrison. His hair used to be thicker. His face had fewer laugh lines back then, but it was him. The same boy who used to sneak me caramel chews during civics class. He wore a navy jacket that still looked sharp despite the humidity, and his smile, well, that hadn't changed much. We talked for a few minutes before he asked, "Coffee's on me if you're sticking around." We found a little table by the windows where the light came in soft and square. He told me about his job, estate law, small firm, lots of trust paperwork, nothing flashy. I told him about my quiet days and my herb garden that refuses to grow basil no matter what I do. Then, kind of out of nowhere, he asked me, gently, not pushy, "What legacy do you want to leave, Carolyn?" The question just hung there between us, like it weighed something. I laughed too fast. "I haven't thought about that in a long time." He nodded, didn't press. "That's okay. Most people don't until they have to." That night, I dug through the drawer in my bedroom, the one with old bank statements, expired coupons, and buried somewhere in the back, my will. I hadn't looked at it in years. The paper still felt stiff, but the words felt outdated, like they'd been written by someone I used to be. Even my handwriting looked younger, more certain. I didn't cry. I just read it, slowly, every word. The next morning, Elaine showed up with a bunch of fresh hydrangeas, deep blue, my favorite. She didn't ask why I looked tired. She just set the flowers in the sink and handed me a cup of tea like always. I think I need to make some edits to my story, I said, eyes on the flowers. She didn't answer right away. Then, with that kind of calm only old friends have, she smiled and said, "It's your pen." After she left, I pulled out a blank journal, one I'd bought a while back but never used because it felt too nice for grocery lists. I opened it, wrote the date in the top corner. Then, at the top of the page, I printed, "If I were seen." The room was quiet, not lonely, just still. And then I wrote the first line, "Love without respect is just quiet pain." If any of this feels familiar, if you've ever been quietly left behind or slowly faded out of someone's life without realizing it, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. I'd really like to hear it. And if you've made it this far, thank you. Just knowing someone's listening, it really does matter. I'm not finished yet. There's still more to the story. So what do you think happens next? Stick around. We'll find out together. Some people rewrite their will out of anger. I rewrote mine out of silence. It was late August, the kind of southern humidity that wraps around you, thick, like the air's holding its breath. I stood outside Tom Harrison's office for a moment before walking in, holding an old envelope full of scribbled notes, a worn copy of my original will, and a photo of Logan tucked in between. That little gap-toothed grin still made my chest tighten. Tom greeted me with the same quiet, warm smile I remembered from years ago, back when our kids were in the same summer reading program, and he always brought a thermos of Earl Grey to parent night. His office still smelled like cedar and coffee. The walls were lined with framed quotes from old books. There was one just behind his desk that caught my eye for the first time. "You only are free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all." I sat down across from him and said, "I brought everything, and I think I'm finally ready." He looked at the photo. "Is this Logan?" I nodded. "He's 10 now, still obsessed with frogs and flashlights." Tom smiled and leaned in a little. "What are you thinking?" I took a breath. "I want to make some changes. Take Haley out as the primary beneficiary, shift it toward education grants, a bit for Logan if he ever wants to go to school. The rest, I want it to go to someone who needed a second chance." Tom sat with that for a second, then asked gently, "Are you sure?" I looked down at my hands. They were steadier than I thought they'd be. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just done auditioning for a role I was never cast in." His assistant Erica came in to witness the signing. She couldn't have been more than 27. Short curls, a notepad filled with perfect loopy handwriting. As I signed each page, she looked up once and said softly, "Most people don't have this kind of clarity." I gave a small smile, bittersweet. Clarity comes slowly, but when it shows up, it doesn't knock. When we were done, Tom handed me the final copy in a neat blue folder. I held it with both hands like it might shift in weight, like it held the version of me I'd kept hidden all these years. "For the me who waited too long," I whispered. As I walked outside, the light had changed. It was early evening, golden, soft. Across the street, a little bookstore caught my eye. In the window, a sign, "Memoir Writing for Beginners, New Arrivals." I stopped in front of it and looked at one of the covers. There was something quietly bold about it. Not loud, not trying to prove anything, just a quiet reminder, your voice still matters, even if no one asked to hear it. I didn't go in, not yet, but I smiled, for the first time in what felt like years. Here's something no one really tells you about setting boundaries. Sometimes the people around you never even noticed you had any to begin with. And grief? It isn't always about losing someone. Sometimes it's about finally seeing what was never really there. I used to keep a drawer full of greeting cards for Haley, birthday cards, little just because notes, a few with watercolor hearts. I'd pick them up when I saw something sweet, tuck them away, thinking maybe one day, maybe there'd be a moment, a reason, a pause long enough to slip love into a mailbox. This morning I opened that drawer, ran my fingers along the edges, and then, one by one, I shredded them. Not out of anger, just quiet certainty. The paper felt thinner than I remembered. Elaine stopped by later with pumpkin bread wrapped in a dish towel. The whole house smelled like cinnamon in late October. She handed me a cup of tea and said, "You look different, not tired, just lighter." "I joined a writing class," I told her, "Wednesday mornings at the community center." Her face lit up like a porch light at dusk. About time. The class was mostly people like me, retired, a little wrinkled, a little wiser. Some were writing family stories, others were scribbling haikus on old napkins. No one asked where I came from or why I was there, and honestly, that felt like kindness. My first piece was called What Love Used to Sound Like. I read it aloud in week 2. My voice cracked twice, my hands shook the paper, but I made it to the end. They clapped, not politely, genuinely. I didn't realize how long it had been since anyone just listened. No interruptions, no corrections, just listened. That Saturday, I walked through the farmer's market. The trees were putting on their golden show, and someone was strumming a soft guitar near the cider stand. I leaned over to smell a pile of apples, and behind me, I heard a voice. "Carolyn!" It was Margot Jensen. I hadn't seen her since the old PTA days. She looked almost exactly the same, maybe more at peace. "You look lighter," she said, tilting her head. I smiled. "I stopped begging to be heard." She laughed, warm and easy, and touched my arm. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That afternoon, Logan sent me a text. Just 6 words. "Can I call you later?" L. My heart lifted just a little. I kept my phone close the rest of the evening, the way you do when hope sneaks back in. He didn't call. I didn't text back. The next day, Elaine came over again, this time with soup and a puzzle, her version of a care package. At some point, while we were fitting edge pieces together, she looked at me and asked, "Do you miss her?" I paused. I missed the idea of her, the daughter I thought I had, the one who used to slip her hand into mine in crowded places. Elaine nodded, fitting a blue piece into the corner. Grief makes more sense when we stop pretending it only comes from death. That night, I opened my laptop. The screen stared back at me, blank, waiting. I hesitated, then typed, Chapter 1, when my voice disappeared. If you've ever waited for a call that never came, if you've held on to hope just a little too long, I want you to know you're not alone. I'd love to hear how you found your way back to yourself. What helped you turn the page? Share a little something with me in the comments. And if you're wondering what I wrote next, well, let's just say, finding your voice is only the beginning. The envelope was thick, the message inside, thin. It showed up mid-morning, stamped confidential in big, bold letters. I found it sitting on the little foyer table, half tucked under the grocery flyer. Outside, the rain had just started, soft, almost shy, like a memory that didn't want to be remembered. I carried it to the living room, set it down on the coffee table, and just stared at it for a while. My tea had already gone lukewarm. The lavender candle I'd lit earlier flickered, like it knew something I didn't. Eventually, I opened it. Not hesitantly, just quietly, like I already knew what was waiting. The letter was typed, double-spaced, signed in that sharp, impersonal way Haley writes her name now. No softness, no warmth. Just, I was made aware of recent changes to your will. If this is true, I'd like to understand why. No mom, no memory, no hint of care. I read it twice, then again, looking between the lines for something, anything that felt human. Not outrage, Not sadness, just something real. But there was nothing. I folded it neatly, walked to the hallway drawer, the same one where her Christmas gift card still sat, untouched, and slid the letter in beside it. It felt like they belonged together. Elaine came by later with banana muffins and the town newsletter. She didn't ask why I looked tired, just handed me a mug and sat across from me, like she always does. After a while, I said, I think. She finally noticed. Elaine nodded. And? And it didn't feel like I thought it would. She reached out and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Awareness doesn't always come with love attached. Later that afternoon, Tom called, just checking in. The revision's been filed, he said. It's all official. Thank you, I told him. I'm at peace with it. And that wasn't a line. That was the truth. But that night, something shifted. I sat by the window with my journal open on my lap, pen in hand, but no words came. My hand hovered over the page, but my mind was somewhere else. I wasn't grieving what had happened. I was grieving what never did. The gap between us, it wasn't just distance, it was deeper, emotional, spiritual, even cellular. The kind of space no letter, no inheritance, no apology could ever close. The tears came quietly, no sobbing, just like how a candle fades when there's no wax left. Gentle, final, honest. Afterward, I picked up my phone. The lock screen lit up with familiar names, Elaine, Tom, even Margot from the farmer's market. And there was Haley. I didn't delete her contact. That would have felt like anger. But I did remove her from my favorites. It was symbolic, small but real. Not erasing her, just recognizing something. That I didn't need her to be the first voice I reached for anymore. Sometimes healing starts in the tiniest edits. It wasn't revenge, it was clarity, a revealing. Late August wrapped around Durham like an old wool blanket, warm, a little heavy, familiar. I sat across from Tom in his office, same desk where, a year ago, my hands had trembled just laying down the first draft of my new will. This time, they didn't. Everything was stacked neatly in front of me, typed, notarized, reviewed. Erica stood nearby, double-checking signatures, making sure everything lined up not just with the law, but with what felt right in my heart. The estate plan was simple. Logan would get a conditional trust, modest, thoughtful. It would unlock when he turned 25, but only if he chose to serve. Community work, public education. I wanted him to understand legacy isn't about money, it's about weight, and how you carry it depends on who put it in your hands. The rest would be split. Scholarships for single moms going back to school. A literacy nonprofit that runs after-school programs in neighborhoods that don't get enough. I'd met the director, Mrs. Joyner, the week before. She had silver braids and bright eyes, and when she hugged me, it felt like we'd known each other for years. You're not just giving us help, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You're giving us time, dignity. At one point, Erica asked if I wanted to include a personal letter. I nodded and handed her the envelope I'd written the night before, in longhand. Legacy is not blood, it said. It's memory with meaning. Elaine sat beside me during the final signing, glasses low on her nose, hands folded gently in her lap. When I passed her the pen to witness, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. You did this with grace, she said. You rewrote your ending without bitterness. Afterward, we went back to my place. I made tea while she poked around the closet I'd been slowly clearing out. She pulled out my old wedding china, still wrapped in packing paper from 2 moves ago. Haley never wanted this, I said quietly. No, Elaine said, but someone might. The next day, I boxed it up and brought it to a women's shelter across town. The woman at the front desk smiled wide when she saw it. We use fancy plates for birthday dinners, she said. These'll feel like a party. And you know what? There was no grief in letting them go, just space. That night, I stood out on the porch with a single candle burning beside me. The air was still and warm. Somewhere nearby, the scent of late summer honeysuckle drifted through. Behind me, the house had held so many versions of me: wife, mother, ghost, shadow. I watched the flame dance. I released this house from waiting, I whispered. It wasn't about Haley anymore. It was about letting go of the door that never opened, about not shrinking to fit someone else's silence. It was about lighting a candle and realizing I didn't need to keep it burning for someone who never planned to come back. Have you ever let something go? Not out of anger, but out of love for yourself? Maybe it was a house, maybe a tradition, maybe just the hope that someone would change. What did that feel like for you? If you feel like sharing, I'm here, I'm listening. And if you're wondering what happens next, well, it's one thing to stop waiting. It's another thing entirely to start living. That part, that's just beginning. My phone rang while I was slicing pears for the tart. Soft jazz was playing in the background, and sunlight poured through the kitchen windows like it was trying to wrap me in gold. It was Haley. I saw her name light up on the screen, and for the first time I let it ring. She left a voicemail. I didn't listen right away. I finished the tart, let it cool, and carefully packed it into a glass dish for the writing group picnic that afternoon. The voicemail could wait. Earlier that morning at the market, I'd picked up sunflowers, thick-stemmed, bold, unapologetically bright. When I got home, I tucked them into a vase, sat down with my tea, and finally hit play. Her voice was clipped, measured, not angry exactly, but tight, controlled. I saw what you did with the will. If this is about money, Mom, I don't understand. Why are you doing this to us? She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask what brought me to that point. Just why I acted. I didn't listen to it again. I just deleted it, then reached for my journal and wrote, "She doesn't ask why I hurt, just why I acted. I didn't feel numb. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt still." Like someone had opened a window inside me and the air was finally moving again. At the writing group picnic that afternoon, I read a piece called The Woman in the Mirror. It was fiction, kind of, about a mother who slowly disappeared, not because she wanted to, but because everyone around her pretended she already had. After I finished, a woman named Clara touched my hand. "That was healing to hear," she said. "I think I've been that woman too." Elaine sat beside me, quietly proud. When most people had wandered off to the snack table, she reached into her bag and handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a tiny bird, mid-flight. "Because you flew," she whispered. I didn't know I needed that moment until it landed in me like a warm stone in the palm of my hand. That evening, I sat at my desk with a single piece of stationery. My handwriting has been steadier lately, maybe because I am too. I wrote, "You have my love, but not my silence anymore. Mom." I sealed the envelope and placed it by the door. Then, on a quiet whim, I opened my laptop and made my very first online hotel reservation. 2 nights, Savannah, Georgia. No reason, no big event, just because I wanted to see something new, to be someone else for a while. Not the mother waiting for a phone call, not the woman haunting her own kitchen, just a woman booking a trip, carrying sunflowers and a small bird around her neck. And in that moment, I felt like I had finally arrived. I packed slowly, folding each piece like it meant something, not because it had to be perfect, but because this trip, this one, was for me. No list someone else handed me, no snacks packed for a child, no emergency contacts scribbled just in case, just my name on a small luggage tag, Carolyn. Savannah welcomed me like an old friend who'd been waiting in the background. The air smelled like salt and magnolia, and jazz floated from cafe doorways like incense. I checked into a tiny bed and breakfast with creaky floors and wallpaper that felt like it had heard secrets. The host greeted me with sweet tea and a warm smile. No questions asked. I didn't unpack right away. I grabbed my journal and walked down to the river walk, found a bench facing the water, and just sat. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder who might call. The breeze tugged gently at my sleeve like a child who wanted nothing, just to be close. Later, I wandered into this little used bookstore, tucked behind a flower cart. The floor creaked, and the owner reminded me of Mr. Rogers. He handed me a soft-bound memoir called Letters to the Women We Were. Inside, someone had written, "To whoever finds this, you matter." I smiled, not the kind you offer politely, but the kind that happens deep in your chest, quiet, full. That evening, I strolled through the art markets, watched locals laugh with their dogs and babies, took myself to dinner, ordered dessert without feeling like I had to earn it. A woman at the next table gave me a nod, not pity, recognition. At the museum the next day, I stopped in front of a painting called The Witness. A woman, alone, standing at the edge of a field, shoulders back, eyes forward, no smile, no flinch. "She looks like how I feel," I wrote in my journal, sketching her outline. I didn't need to explain it. On my last morning, I ordered 2 cups of tea from the little kitchen downstairs, one for me and one for the woman I used to be, the one who swallowed her words, over-apologized, and waited too long to be seen. I placed it in the second chair. Let the steam rise in silence. Later that morning, I walked back to the bookstore and added my name to a sign-up sheet. Memoir Circle, Spring 2024, Lead Facilitator, Carolyn. I didn't even hesitate. Back in my room, I kicked off my shoes and stretched out on the bed. One of those old spreads with raised cotton dots like stories sewn in. The room felt quiet, settled. That's when I saw it. An email notification glowing softly on my phone. From Haley subject, "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. Not yet. It's still sitting there, unread. Not because I'm avoiding it, but because I get to choose when I open that door. And maybe, for the first time, that choice is mine. Have you ever done that? Chosen peace over urgency? Chosen yourself even when someone else finally wanted your attention? If you've been there, if this chapter speaks to something in you, I'd love to know what helped you find your courage. Leave a comment if you're ready and stay with me. Because next I have to decide if the door I closed should ever be opened again. Some conversations are long overdue, and some aren't really conversations at all, just ledgers. People trying to balance what they think they're owed. I set my laptop on the coffee table, angled the screen so the fireplace behind me was just a soft glow, not a distraction. Outside, big December snowflakes were drifting past the window, slow like confetti. I wrapped both hands around my mug, ginger tea, no honey, and clicked the Zoom link. Haley's face popped up before the audio caught up. Hair in a sharp bob, makeup perfect, and that tight look around her mouth, the one I remembered from old report card talks. "Why did you change the will?" she asked. No hello. "Why are you freezing us out?" I took a slow breath. "You stopped asking for me, Haley. You only noticed when something went missing." Her eyes narrowed. "Mom, that's not fair. I've been busy. Greg's job, Logan's school. It's a lot." "I know." I nodded, calm, not cruel. But pressure isn't the same as presence. She blinked fast, looked down, like she was searching for notes that weren't there. "This feels punitive." "No," I said. "It feels overdue." Behind her, I saw a doorway. Logan peeked in, just half his face. He spotted me and grinned, wiggled his fingers in a small wave. My heart pinched, gently, like a muscle stretching after being still too long. I waved back. Haley turned, saw him, and gently guided him out of view. "Just a minute, buddy." When she turned back, her voice softened, but it was still guarded. "You've always helped people, Mom. Why couldn't you help us this time?" I held her gaze. "I didn't cut you out. I gave to the people who made me feel seen. If that's not you, that's just the truth." A silence opened between us, wide, clear. I could almost hear the snow building up on the windowsill. Her shoulders dropped just a little. "So that's it?" she asked. Her eyes were bright but dry. "That," I said, "is the beginning of my life being mine." She stared at me, like she was trying to translate a language she used to speak, but had forgotten from lack of use. I didn't rush to fill the space. I've learned that silence, when you choose it, is its own kind of respect. Eventually, she said, "I have to pick Logan up from chess club." It sounded like an apology wearing a winter coat, heavy, unsure. "Go on," I said. And I gave her the same small smile I used to offer after piano recitals, the one that meant, "You made it through that part. The next note is yours to play." Then the screen went dark. I closed the laptop, set it aside, and leaned back. The snow was falling thicker now, quiet and beautiful. My tea had gone lukewarm, but I drank it anyway, tasted the ginger, and something else, maybe space. Tom's voice echoed in my mind. "When you retire from being someone's idea of you, you start meeting yourself." And I could feel that meeting in the soft hum of the house, in the pop of the fire, in the way my breath gently fogged the window as I leaned in to watch the snow. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be called back. My life, unscheduled, undecorated, fully mine, sat before me like untouched snow, and somewhere, just beyond the edge of this quiet night, another chapter was waiting to leave its footprints. I didn't expect her to apologize, and for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't waiting for it either. By January, the cold had started to ease. Durham wore its winter differently now, less ice, more hush. Outside the library, snow clung to the bottoms of boots lined up by the door. Inside, the room was full of steam from paper cups and the quiet breath of things still waiting to be said. My first memoir workshop began quietly, like most good things do. A circle of folding chairs, 10 strangers, one shared prompt. "What did your silence cost you?" At first, they just stared at their pages. Then slowly, pens started to move. There was a woman named Lila, early 30s maybe. She tapped her pen 3 times against her notebook before she started writing. I used to do the same thing, testing the silence to see if it would echo. I moved around the room, slow and steady, just reading faces, offering little nods. This wasn't about finding answers. It was about giving shape to the ache. When it came time to share, Lila went first. Her voice trembled, but not her truth. "I stopped telling my mom about my life," she said, "because she never remembered the details. And now, I don't even remember if I ever wanted her to know." Afterward, she stayed behind, looked at me and said, "That prompt, I think I needed it more than I thought." I nodded. So did I. Later that evening, Elaine and I found a cozy little cafe. Over soup and crusty bread, she beamed at me from across the table. "You looked like a professor up there," she said, teasing as she sipped her cocoa. "Like someone who knows their story's worth telling?" I smiled. "I don't need to be a character in Haley's version anymore. I have my own version now." She reached across the table and gave my hand a quick squeeze. Later that week, I finally visited the nonprofit I'd chosen to support in the revised will. It was just a small literacy center tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon. 2 of the scholarship recipients were there, nervous, smiling. One of them, a girl named Kiara, had braids tied in gold thread. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for believing in people you didn't even know." I held her a little longer than I expected. "We know each other better than you think," I whispered back. When I got home, there was a card waiting by the door. No stamp, someone had dropped it off by hand. It was from Tom, his handwriting clear as ever. "You authored this. No signature." He didn't need one. That night, I tidied the living room, folded the extra blanket neatly, sat down with a cup of chamomile. I didn't scroll, didn't reread anything. I just sat, with myself, and with the quiet kind of peace I'd been slowly writing my way toward. And just before bed, I remembered the mail I'd forgotten to check. There was 1 envelope, to Grandma from Logan. My breath caught in the warm light of the kitchen. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't labeled confidential. It was written in the blocky, careful handwriting of a little boy who still meant every single word he chose. It was his handwriting. A little crooked, a little brave. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers resting lightly on the envelope. The spring breeze pushed at the curtains, and the scent of daffodils drifted in, soft and sweet. I didn't rush to open it. Some moments deserve stillness. I peeled the flap open quietly. Inside was a sheet of lined notebook paper, a little torn along the edge. No return address, just his words. "Grandma, I don't know what happened, but I remember you reading me stories about brave people and making pancakes with chocolate chips shaped like dinosaurs. You made me feel safe. I hope I get to see you again someday." Logan. My breath caught, just like it used to when he'd wrap those small arms around my waist. That kind of hug you don't realize you're starving for until it's already over. I didn't cry. Instead, I reached for my favorite stationery, the one with little wildflowers along the edge, and I wrote back, "Dear Logan, you always had a place here. When you're ready, it'll still be waiting. Love, Grandma." I sealed it slowly, then tucked it beside the garden boots by the door. I'd take it to the mailbox later. For now, I just wanted to sit with this stillness a little longer. Elaine showed up later that afternoon with a pie that smelled like cinnamon and friendship. She took one look at me, grinned wide, and said, "You look like the freest woman I know." I laughed. Maybe I am. We sat on the porch, pie plates balanced on our laps, watching the daffodils sway under the lazy sun. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It held us. It didn't hide a thing. After she left, I went inside and pulled out a padded envelope I'd tucked in the drawer. It had come from the small press last week. I hadn't opened it yet. I was waiting for the right kind of quiet. Today was that kind. Inside was my book, the quiet part out loud. The title shimmered in soft gold across a muted blue cover. I ran my hand over it, like tracing a memory I'd finally earned. I brewed chamomile tea, poured it into the old mug with the faded cardinal, and brought both outside. The manuscript sat in my lap as I leaned back into the porch swing and let it rock with the breeze. I read every word slowly, remembered every version of me tucked inside those pages. The mother who waited, the woman who stayed silent, the person who finally decided to speak. At the end, I closed the book gently, let it rest on my lap, then looked up at the trees just starting to bud. "I mattered," I whispered. The words were soft, but sure. I always did. The sun warmed my shoulders. The wind played with the edges of the pages like it was ready to read the whole thing again. Somewhere nearby, a few kids were laughing. Birds called out to each other in the hush of early evening. I didn't need applause. I didn't need repair. I had voice, I had peace, and a porch full of blooming daffodils. And somewhere, a grandson who remembered chocolate chip dinosaurs. That was enough. Logan's note still sits on my kitchen table, next to a vase of daffodils just beginning to bloom. Not every silence ends with applause, but sometimes it ends with a letter that reminds your heart it still matters. If I've learned anything, it's this. Love without respect turns into a quiet ache we learn to live with, but we don't have to. At any age, we can choose to honor the version of ourselves we used to silence. We can stop waiting and start living. If this story reminded you of something you've been carrying alone, I hope you'll share a piece of it in the comments. You never know who might feel seen just because you spoke. And if you're ready for another story of quiet strength, stay with me. Next up, my son left me at the airport, so I left him at the bank. With no roof, no rescue, no reply. Trust me, you'll want to hear how that one ends.